have you join me on Global News and Zuma Nigeria. I am Lois Duraki, and we begin the news with the ex-UK foreign chief predicts swift Russia-Ukraine end if Trump wins. Peru former president sentenced to over 20 years for bribery. Poll shows Trump leading Harris among Arab Americans. This Chinese signals Republican women can vote for Harris. And Israeli airstrikes target Lebanon and Gaza. Stay with me for these and more stories. David Owen often describes the war in Ukraine as Russia's second invasion, as a constant reminder of the 2014 Crimean conflict. An ex-British Foreign Secretary in the late 1970s, an MP for 26 years under Labour, and an ex-member of the House of Lords and European Union peace negotiator in the former Yugoslavia, Owen updated his latest book, Riddle, Misery and Enigma, 200 Years of British-Russian Relations, published October 2021, after Russia's full-fledged invasion of Ukraine in 2022. In an interview session, Owen, 86, discussed Russia and Ukraine, Moscow's terminal relationship with the United Kingdom, and why he thinks the United States presidential poll in November will determine what comes next. After Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022, he signed a letter published in the Financial Times that called for a new NATO treaty with Russia that engenders no institutional hostility. Nearly 1,000 days into the war, NATO is ever closer to Russia, and President Vladimir Putin is warning of direct conflict with the military alliance. According to Owen, I think ties have got seriously worse, and I regret that. I don't myself think it will be possible to move back into a productive sort of dialogue that we had with former Russian President Boris Yeltsin. Yes, until the issue of the Ukraine war is over. Now that may be on the horizon. I think it does rely a lot on who wins the presidential election in the United States. But if Republican candidate and former U.S. President Donald Trump was to come back, there was very little doubt he would, as he has frequently said, try to settle the Ukraine war and improve personal relations with Russian President Vladimir Putin. He was asked if Ukraine should be allowed to use Western-made long-range missiles to strike deep within Russia. But he said, we are in the hands of U.S. President Joe Biden. He is still in charge of the American policy and has strong feelings on it. It is clear that Biden is extremely reluctant in the present circumstances of NATO's involvement with Ukraine to increase the tension, he said. At what point was it clear to you that UK-Russia relations had reached the lowest level since the Cold War? He was asked. And he said, I think it was the second invasion of Ukraine. After the first invasion in 2014, it was reasonable to hope that Russia would see that this was not acceptable. Perhaps we didn't send a firm enough message. The negotiations were largely conducted between the then German Chancellor Angela Merkel and the French. The British were not primarily engaged in that very dialogue. Maybe Putin underestimated how the NATO countries will respond to an invasion of Ukraine. It's an illusion if they think they can have the separate battle with us. I'm surprised that the people as sensible as Russia's former president Dmitry Medvedev believes that he can just waft into tactical nuclear weapons discourse, he added, saying further that we need to remember when Putin went to China and talked to Chinese President Xi Jinping about his intentions over Ukraine. Xi said China will not support the use of nuclear weapons in reclaiming Ukraine. That position has not changed, and I think it's extremely important that it does not change, according to him. Talking judicial matters, Alejandro Toledo, Peruvian ex-president, has been sentenced to over 20 years in prison, the newest Latin American leader to be jailed in relation with the Odebrecht construction firm corruption scandal. On Monday, Toledo was convicted of taking $35 million in bribes from the Brazilian construction firm in exchange for a freeway construction contract and was sentenced to 20 years and 6 months in prison. I want to go to a private clinic. I ask you to please let me get better or die at home, Toledo said at a hearing last week, saying that he was dealing with health issues stemming from cancer. The 78-year-old former leader of the Andean nation, who served in office from 2001 to 2006, received one of the toughest sentences yet handed out in linking to Odebrecht's campaign of bribery in exchange for political favors across the continent. During a year-long trial, he consistently denied charges of money laundering and collusion leveled against him by prosecutors. He was first apprehended in the United States in 2019 after Peru requested his extradition and was sent back there in 2022 after years of legal debate over his potential extradition. Odebrecht-related scandals have led to the jailing of officials in Peru, Panama and Ecuador. Investigations of corruption by the construction giant have also happened in countries such as Guatemala and Mexico. The company has changed its name to Novono. In 2019, Peru jailed 14 top lawyers while they were probed for allegations of providing the firm with preferential treatment in public works contracts. Toledo will serve his sentence in a prison on the outskirts of the Peruvian capital of Lima, specially constructed to house former presidents. He may soon have additional company. Two more ex-president Pedro Pablo Cusquinis and Ollanta Humala are under investigation in similar cases related to Odebrecht. Ex-President Pedro Castillo is also being detained as he faces charges of rebellion after a failed attempt to dissolve Congress in 2022. Meanwhile, on U.S. 2024 election, Donald Trump is closely leading Kamala Harris among Arab Americans as the race for president of the United States enters the latest stretch. A fresh poll suggests the newest sign that war in Gaza is costing Democrats support among voters with outsized influence in a major battleground state. Trump leads Harris 45% to 43% among the key demographic, with 2 weeks to go until voters choose the next U.S. president, according to a report released on Monday. According to the poll, the Republican candidate is also seen as more likely to successfully resolve the Israel-Palestine conflict, leading his Democratic rival 39% to 33% on the question. Trump and Harris are tied at 38% on the question of who will be better for the Middle East in general. Asked which issues were the biggest concern to the Arab American community, 29% of respondents chose the Israel-Palestine conflict, ahead of 21% who picked the economy and the cost of living, and 13% who chose racism and discrimination. Despite the edge for Trump, the ex-president is also seen as more supportive of Israel's current government than his Democratic rival by a 6-point margin, according to the poll. Most of the results, based on a sample of 500 Arab Americans, are within the margin of error of plus or minus 5.93%. The poll is the newest warning to Democrats that President Joe Biden's backing for Israel's war in Gaza could be putting his vice president's election hopes in jeopardy ahead of the November 5th vote. Earlier this month, in a poll released by the Arab American Institute, Trump and Harris were virtually tied at 42% to 41% respectively. Harris's level of support among Arab Americans in the poll was 18 points below where Biden's was in 2020. Arab American voters are seen as theoretically crucial to Harris's election prospects due to their high concentration in Michigan, one of 7 swing states anticipated to decide the outcome of the vote. The Midwestern state is home to the biggest concentration of Arab Americans in North America and the first Arab-majority U.S. city, Dearborn. In September, the mayor of Michigan's Trump, the first U.S. city with an all-Muslim government, endorsed Trump, describing the Republican as a man of principles and the right choice. Biden won Michigan by about 150,000 votes in 2020, while Trump carried the state by only about 11,000 voters in 2016. Still sticking to U.S. 2024 election, Republican women can vote for Kamala Harris and they don't need to tell anyone about it. That was the most outstanding takeaway from Liz Cheney's Blue Wall Swing State Tour with the vice president on Monday, as the high-line conservative and ex-congresswoman formed a permission structure of personal empowerment for suburban Republican and independent women to snub Donald Trump and back the Democratic nominee. The mother of 5, who was loyally anti-abortion as a lawmaker and who cheered the demise of Roe v. Wade, also cautioned women aren't getting vital reproductive health care after the Supreme Court's momentous 2022 decision, and said only Harris had the compassion to deal with the issue. Cheney continually made clear she still opposes abortion, but explained in Waukesha County, a swing district just outside Milwaukee, that I have been very troubled, deeply troubled by what I have watched happen in so many states. She added, I have been troubled by the extent to which you have women who, as the vice president said, in some cases have died who can't get medical treatment that they need because providers are worried about criminal liability. Adding that we are facing a situation today where I think that it's an unattainable one. Cheney was speaking in her third event of the day with Harris, which included earlier stops in Pennsylvania and the Michigan, and in which she often made a more expansive case against the Republican nominee than the vice president has made herself. Earlier in Detroit's suburb, Cheney had noted that some Republicans feared reprisals, even violence, if they came out against Trump. I will just remind people, if you're all unconcerned, you can vote your conscience and not ever have to say a word to anybody, Cheney said, as she sat side by side with Harris. There will be millions of Republicans who do that on November 5th. Cheney was once on the fast track to the top of the GOP, but she was ousted as House GOP conference chair for condemning her party for covering up for Trump over the January 6, 2021 attack on the U.S. Capitol. A pro-Trump challenger then took her warming seat in the 2022 primary, but her appearance alongside Harris shows she's not giving up on principled politics simply because she lost power. It also points to one of the most critical factors in the final days of the general election campaign, whether the Democratic vice president can win over significant numbers of Republicans. Away from U.S. 2024 election, now on an Israel-Lebanon conflict, an Israeli strike outside Lebanon's biggest public hospital in Beirut killed no less than 13 people, including a child, the health ministry said. The strike at Rafik Hariri University Hospital was not in an area covered by evacuation orders issued by the Israeli military, according to report. Israel's military has alleged a Hezbollah bunker is hidden under another buried hospital, but Sahel general officials said the claims were baseless and that Israel made similar allegations in Gaza before aiming medical facilities. In northern Gaza, almost no aid is entering the Jabalia refugee camp, the United Nations cautioned. Crowds of displaced Palestinians have been moved from the camp in an area where more than 400 people have been killed in the Israeli military's two-week offensive. Lebanon's health ministry said on Tuesday the death toll has increased to 13 people, including a child, following an Israeli attack close to a hospital on the outskirts of Beirut. The number of wounded from the attack outside the Rafik Hariri University Hospital, the largest public hospital in Lebanon, has increased to 57, the ministry said. 17 of the wounded were hospitalized, with 7 in critical condition, it added. Antony Blinken, U.S. Secretary of State, arrived in Tel Aviv for meetings with Israeli officials on Tuesday as the United States looks to advance efforts to find a diplomatic solution to the rising conflict in the Middle East. Blinken, making his 11th visit to the region since the outbreak of war last year, arrives at a critical time as Israel plans its anticipated retaliation to an Iranian missile attack, and a ceasefire talks over the wars in Lebanon and Gaza appear stalled. The top U.S. diplomat's visit also comes at a time of strained ties between Washington and its closest regional ally, which has seen the U.S. caution Israel that it may stop supplying weapons unless the humanitarian situation in Gaza improves. A recent U.S. intelligence leak about Israel's war plans has risked further straining those relations. However, the State Department said on Monday it did not expect the leak to be discussed during Blinken's meetings. On Monday, John Kirby, National Security Council spokesman, said the White House is not optimistic that ceasefire talks in Gaza or Lebanon will restart soon. The U.S. will be complicit in any Israeli aggression against Iran if it emboldened Israel by providing it with advanced weaponry, underscoring the high tensions in the region, Iran's mission to the United Nations said on Monday. More stories now on COP's stinging Indigenous Colombians back 2030 biodiversity plan. Closely 2,000 indigenous people from the southwest of Colombia arrived in the city of Cali on Monday to protest. Cali is hosting the 16th United Nations Biodiversity Conference. The message of the protesters could be read on their traditional chivas, colorful vehicles with open tops that support the government agenda for the summit. Colombia, as host country, has decided to include indigenous and Afro-descendant groups, which it considers significant to reversing biodiversity loss in the COP16, and they participated in the construction of the Biodiversity Action Plan to 2030 that the country presented on Monday. Susanna Mohammed, the president of COP16 and Colombian Environment Minister, said in her opening speech that it is required to recognize the political power of indigenous peoples and local communities who can lead solutions to the biodiversity crunch. CRIC and other connected organizations assure that their presence in Cali, which on the other occasions has been against the government in power, is projected to support the agenda promoted by the government of Gustavo Petro and not challenge it. The Biodiversity Conference seeks to follow up on a historic global treaty on biodiversity that was signed at the Montreal meeting in 2022, which includes the protection of 30% of the planet and 30% of degraded ecosystems by 2030. It is attended by delegations from 196 countries and runs until 1st November. Now, key points on Gabon's new constitution and referendum. According to the transitional government, Gabon is set to conduct a referendum on November 16th regarding a proposed fresh constitution, marking a key step toward restoring a civilian government as pledged by the military junta following a coup. The final draft of the latest constitution project was made public on Monday, October 21st in Gabon. An inclusive national dialogue is scheduled to convene, bringing together citizens and civil society groups to permit everyone to suggest reforms for the new constitutional framework. The proposed constitution will provide for a structure without a prime minister, featuring a 7-year presidential term that can be renewed once, with only individuals born to Gabonese parents eligible for the presidency. French will continue to be the official language of Gabon, and there may be a proposal for mandatory military service for all citizens. There will be a focus on safeguarding individual liberties and making sure the separation of powers to boost democracy. At the end of this process, a referendum is planned on the 16th of November to present the draft constitution for public approval. This will be a key step towards restoring civilian governance and implementing the recommendations from the national dialogue, which will be a litmus test for a true democratic revival, leading Gabon into a new chapter. After the disputed presidential election in August 2023, which favored Ali Bongo Ondimba, the Committee for the Transition and Restoration of Institutions, CTRI, assumed control, citing electoral fraud. The existing institutions were pulled and a transitional parliament was established, incorporating members from both the opposition and the former government. This dialogue will serve as the foundation for the draft constitution presently under consideration. In the wake of the 2023 coup that overthrew President Ali Bongo Ondimba, the nation seeks to reshape its legal structure and create civilian governance after years of Bongo family rule. Gabon's new constitution offers a unique chance to reshape the nation's political landscape following a tumultuous period. We'll take a quick break, and when we come back, stories from Nigeria. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back now on Stories from Nigeria, and we begin with DHQ declares calls for military coup as treasonous act. The Defense Headquarters, DHQ, has cautioned individuals calling for military coup to cease because the act is a treasonable offense, even as the Armed Forces of Nigeria, AFN, reaffirmed its loyalty to President Ahmed Bola Tinubu. This was contained in a press statement on Monday signed by Director Defense Information, Brigadier General Tukur Gusau, where it is also explained that it has not announced the appointment of any senior officer as the Acting Chief of Army Staff, COAS, contrary to speculation by certain media outlets, highlighting that no such appointment exists within the Armed Forces of Nigeria. He said, and I quote, that Chief Army Staff Lieutenant General Torit Lagbaja is currently on a well-deserved rest as part of his 2024 annual leave. The AFN is professionally managed, and all the service chiefs are performing their duties as stipulated in the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Major General Abdusalam Bagudu Ibrahim, the Chief of Policy and Plans, is providing routine briefs to the COAS in accordance with standard military procedures. According to the DHQ, media organizations are advised to verify information with the appropriate authorities before releasing fake news to the public. Additionally, those advocating for a military takeover, as seen in a viral video, should be aware that such actions are treasonable under the Constitution. The AFN is steadfastly committed to the preservation and advancement of our democracy and loyal to President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's administration. The military remains focused on achieving its statutory responsibilities of protecting the nation's integrity. The relative peace being enjoyed today is a direct result of the President's support for the military and the dedication of the AFN leadership. To this end, the AFN and relevant security agencies have been mandated to take necessary action against any individual or group advocating for unconstitutional action and changes in the country. The CDS appreciates Nigerians for their support and prayers. Victory is definitely assured. And finally on the news, Tinubu aims to boost oil output by 1 million BBP in a year in a transformed bid to grow Nigeria's crude oil output considerably in the next 12 months. Yesterday, President Bola Tinubu launched the 1 million BBTP initiative intended to raise production by 1 million barrels per day BPD by joining dormant oil assets and optimizing existing ones. At the event in Abuja, which coincided with the 3rd anniversary of the establishment of the Nigerian Upstream Petroleum Regulatory Commission (NUPRC), international oil companies (IOCs) and indigenous oil producers, banks and oil and gas service providers vowed to support the federal government in the latest efforts. The program, organized by the NUPRC, was themed Transformation, Innovation and Excellence and featured the who is who in the country's oil and gas and banking sectors. Tinubu emphasized that his policy interventions in the oil industry were beginning to bear fruits, expressing confidence in the long-term benefits of the industry's policy reforms for the good of the country's more than 200 million people. Represented by Senator George Akume, the Secretary to the Government of the Federation's SGF, the President noted that even though the oil and gas industry had long been the lifeblood of Nigeria's national economy, the present administration was working diligently to change this and diversify the economy from over-dependence on the production of fossil fuels. Tinubu, however, noted that his administration was also determined to maximize its revenue potential from the country's nature-endowed hydrocarbon resources while focusing on decarbonization approaches to oil and gas production. The Commission Chief Executive NUPRC Gbenga Komolafe, in his presentation, said that in the last 3 years, the Commission had made giant strides towards attaining key goals despite the persistent challenges of the global push for energy transition and the call for defunding of fossil fuel. Another look at the top stories. Ex-UK foreign chief predicts swift Russia-Ukraine end if Trump wins. Peru former president sentenced to over 20 years for bribery. Poll shows Trump leading Harris among Arab Americans. Liz Cheney signals Republican women can vote for Harris. And Israeli airstrikes target Lebanon and Gaza. And that's all on the news. Thanks for watching. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.